Hello all, my name is Krish Naik and welcome to my YouTube channel. So guys, this video is a one-shot video on understanding about GitHub Actions. We will be understanding what exactly is GitHub Actions. It is also called as a CICD tool. What exactly is continuous integration, continuous deployment or delivery. Along with that, we'll also see one end-to-end project where we'll automate an entire workflow. GitHub Actions is an amazing tool, open source tool, where many people can specifically use it whenever you're developing your end-to-end machine learning, deep learning project. It can be any kind of projects. It will be super important. So we will be going from basics. We'll be implementing completely step by step. We will be starting with the theoretical intuition. We'll understand about each and every component, and we'll go ahead, implement some amazing projects as we go ahead. So yes, go ahead and enjoy this particular session. And if you're interested to check out my Udemy courses, all the links will be given in the description of this particular video. These are the most affordable courses in the entire market. Go ahead and check it out. So let's enjoy this particular one-shot video. Hello guys, welcome to this amazing module where we are going to learn about GitHub Actions. Along with this, we are going to discuss about CICD pipelines. Whenever we talk about CICD pipelines, this basically means continuous integration and continuous deployment, or it can also be said as continuous delivery pipelines. Whenever you are developing an end-to-end project, let it be with respect to data science, with respect to web development or any other field, this will be very important if you seamlessly want to develop software development workflows. Okay. So in this video and in the upcoming series of video, we are probably going to discuss about GitHub Actions. We are going to implement multiple examples so that we see multiple workflows example and how it can probably automate the entire software development workflows. Okay. So first of all, let's go ahead with the definition over here. So GitHub Action is a powerful automation tool. I'm going to highlight some of the important things provided by GitHub that enables developer to automate tasks related to the software development workflows. It allows for the creation of custom workflow. This is really important because in the upcoming series of video, we are also going to develop our own custom workflows, which can be triggered by various events such as pushes to the repository, pull requests, or schedule events. These workflows can be used for various purposes, including continuous integration and continuous deployment, and even testing and more. Okay. Now, let me just go ahead step by step, and we will be discussing about why exactly GitHub Actions will be very much beneficial. Okay. So whenever I talk about GitHub Action, okay, whenever we talk about GitHub Action, this is exactly you can probably say this is a CI/CD tool. Okay, which automates the entire software development workflows. Okay. And whenever I talk about GitHub Action, you will be seeing that how we will work with this. And this is already provided by GitHub. That is the most amazing thing. Now, let me just talk about the basic differences and some of the key terms that we are going to use regularly. Whenever I talk about GitHub, right? Whenever I talk about GitHub, this is specifically my code repository, right? Code repository. Okay. You need to really remember this because I still, there are many people, what I see is that they get confused with respect to the kind of terminologies that we use over here. So if I talk about GitHub, okay, GitHub, this is specifically my code repository. Now, when we talk about GitHub as a code repository, that basically means we commit our code over here, right? We commit our code over here. We create branches, let's say the entire project code that we are making sure that, right? We really need to commit. We need to work in a collaborative way over here, right? Collaborative way over here. Along with GitHub, you will also find different other GitHub, other code repositories like GitLabs and all. But in this example, in this course itself, I am probably going to discuss about GitHub, right? So then the next key terminologies that we specifically use is something called as Git. Now, what exactly is Git? Okay, so Git over here, and I hope everybody may have heard about this term. It is a distributed version control system. It is a distributed version control system. And this is super important for developers. Why? because here you will be able to track your source code files. Right? So you may be writing a lot of code, okay? And let's say that you want to probably create different stories, right? You want to probably solve different use cases. Now in a specific project, right, there will be many developers who will be collaborating in a specific project, right? Let's say I have a project over here. I want to probably develop this end-to-end project. Now this project, let's say this is my data science project, okay? Data project, it can be any project as such. In this project, there will be many developers who will be specifically working, right? So let's say this is my developer A, this is my developer B, this is my developer C, right? So we definitely have many developers who are working in this specific project. This developer A may be working on some story. Let's say this is story A. This developer B will be working on story B, right? This developer C will be working on story C, right? Now, when this many number of developers are specifically working, right? Whenever we talk about this particular stories, right? That basically means we are developing a different module that needs to get finally integrated with this entire data science project, right? So this is basically how we work in a company. We work in a collaborative way, right? We work in a collaborative way. Now, when we are working in a collaborative way, let's say if developer A has created 3 files, right? There should be a way of tracking the entire source code that is written by developer A, right? And similarly with respect to developer B, similarly with respect to developer C. At the end of the day, when they are creating this entire data science project, after writing the code in the local environment, what they do finally, they try to commit this entire thing into the GitHub repository, right? So finally, all your code goes into the GitHub repo, right? Now, in order to commit in the GitHub repo, we can specifically use Git, because Git will actually help you to track the entire source code files, right? With respect to story A, story B, story C. And with respect to this, you may also get some kind of conflicts. Let's say developer A is created a file called as app.py, right? And developer B, what they did is that they pulled this particular code and they also started writing the code in app.py. Now what happens when they're committing in the GitHub repository? Some conflicts will specifically happen, right? Then we need to resolve the specific conflicts, and that is where your Git will be super important, because it is nothing but it is a distributed version control. Not only that, if you want to switch to different branch, switching branches, merging branches, everywhere this Git will be super beneficial, right? But at the end of the day, we are committing our entire code in this specific repository, that is GitHub repository. Now, I hope you got an basic differences of understanding what is GitHub. GitHub is our entire code repository where we'll be committing our code, and Git, it is nothing but it is a distributed version control system. Okay. These two are the most important things. Now, the third thing that we specifically talk about is nothing but our GitHub Actions. Right? We talk about nothing but GitHub Actions. Now, GitHub Actions is already provided by Git, right? And it is nothing but it is a CICD tool. CICD tool basically means what? Continuous integration. So let me talk about this. Continuous integration and continuous deployment. Continuous deployment. Now let's talk about this. This is really important whenever you want to probably develop an end-to-end project. Okay. So in order to explain this, first of all, I will provide you some definition so that you can refer these things. Okay. Let's see this definition. Okay. Now over here, let's mark this as bold. And we will just read the definition, because I need to make you understand what exactly it is. Okay. So continuous integration and continuous deployment are two key practices in modern software development, and GitHub Actions can facilitate both. CI is a practice where developers frequently merge their code, changes into a shared repository, each merge triggers an automated build and testing process to ensure that changes do not break the existing functionality. With GitHub Actions, developer can set up workflows to automatically build and test their code every time they push the changes to the repository or create a pull request. So this is what continuous integration is all about. Don't worry, I will be showing you multiple examples where I will explain about continuous integration. We'll also be discussing about continuous deployment. Now, once this continuous integration is specifically done, continuous deployment extends the concept of continuous integration by automatically deploying the code to the production environment after it passes all the required tests. Okay. It can be configured and all. We'll see a multiple practical examples how it can basically be configured. Okay. But in order to make you understand about continuous integration, continuous deployment, let me just take a very good example. And again, we'll see that how GitHub Actions actually help us to do that. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and let's take one specific example. Let's say that this is my data science project. This is my data science project. Okay. Now, inside this particular project, I have 3 stories needs to be implemented. This is my story A. This is my story B. And this is my story C. Okay. So this is my stories that needs to be implemented. When I say stories, I'm probably saying that, hey, we need to implement this functionalities in our data science project. And let's say this particular data science project, already we have developed some of the stories, and this is my main branch. Let's consider that this line that I'm actually creating in my GitHub repository is my main branch. Now see this, okay? Now first story A is assigned to a developer, okay? Developer A, let's say developer A over here. So what is basically done is that if the developer A wants to start working on the story a very good practice that we specifically do in any industry which follows an agile software development methodology process, what they do is that they try to take a branch. They try to create a branch from this main branch, which will be a replica of this branch, and they'll create a new branch. Now this branch, I will try to name it as story A branch. Okay. The reason of doing this is that because I do not want to disturb the main branch over here, because this main branch may have all the previous functionalities of this data science project. Now, whenever a developer A wants to probably work on this story A, which is a new story, which is a new functionality to be implemented, what he or she will do, they will create a new branch from this particular main branch. They'll name it to story A branch. I'm just taking it as an example. Now, after developing this entire branch, what they do, let's say after doing all the coding, after implementing all the stories over here, they will also write something called as test cases, right? So they will go ahead and write test cases so that we will be able to verify whether the story is working or not. Then after writing the test cases, we will go ahead and do the build in our local to see that everything is working fine. And we'll also make sure we'll test something so that the previous use cases that are present in the main branch, it should be working fine, right? Now, after this entire process is done, once we find out everything is working fine, we will go ahead and merge in this particular main branch. Okay. We will specifically go ahead and merge on this specific main branch, right? Now, after the merging is done, that basically means our story will get merged in this main branch. Now before we are merging, there are also some of the important things that we specifically follow in this workflow. Okay. And here is what I really want to introduce to something called as workflow. Because if you are merging in this specific branch, you should know that because this main branch has already all the previous functionalities. It should not break the previous functionalities, right? It should not break the previous functionalities. So what we really need to do, we need to run all these test cases. We need to run all these test cases so that it should not break anything. Then we should basically build our entire project to just understand that our entire project is working absolutely fine. And the third thing is that we also do some amount of testing. This testing specifically is done when we do the deployment. So I will not include it over here. Okay. Now, running all these test cases and building a project can be a part of the workflow. And this will only be done when we are merging this entire story A branch to our main branch, because these are some of the nulls and checks we really need to do before we merge all these things. Because if we don't do these checks, the story, let's say that the module that we have probably developed, if there is some problem over there, if you have written a code which will break the entire previous functionalities, then it will be really bad, right? And that is where your continuous integration concepts will come. Now, this is just with respect to a single developer. What if I have another developer? Now, my another developer is that this person wants to develop in story B. So what he will do, he or she will do, they will create another branch. So this will be my story B branch. Story B branch, right? Now, once the story B branch is created, again, this entire story will get implemented. Then again, this developer will also write the test cases, right? Then they will also be doing this building the artifact in the local, and they will also test this entire thing in the local itself. They'll also see whether the previous stories is working fine or not. Some of the common previous stories. Now, after this is implemented, what they will do next step? They will again try to merge over here, right? Merge to the main branch. Now, when the merge is basically happening, please see this, okay? When the merge is specifically happening, let's say that there is one common file wherein the developer A also has changed and developer B also has changed, right? Developer A has written 4 additional lines of code. Developer B is writing its own 10 additional lines of code. Now, when they are trying to merge in the main branch, what will happen? A specific conflict will happen, right? So here, there are scenarios where you will face some kind of conflict within the code. So you need to resolve this particular conflict, right? Resolve this particular conflict. Resolving conflict basically means if two developers have changed the same file, there may be that both the codes needs to be merged before committing it to the main branch. Okay. Now, once we resolve this particular conflict, the next workflow that I really want to probably start over here, right? Workflow. I need to probably execute all the test cases, right? I will also want to create a workflow wherein we review the code with the best practices. Review the code with the best practices, right? I also want to probably do this, and there will be another workflow where I will be building the project. So this will be the part of this particular workflow. Now, why we are doing this? So that our entire process of this continuous integration, and this is what continuous integration is. This is what your entire continuous integration is, right? Because in this continuous integration, we are working with multiple developers and they are making sure, that they are working in such a way that even if we keep on adding any number of developers for probably solving this data science project itself, right? There should be a very automated way of following this entire workflow and building our entire data science project, right? And that is where your continuous integration will come. Now, let's go ahead and see the definition. Continuous integration is a practice where developers frequently merge their code, changes into shared repository. Each merge triggers an automated build and testing process to ensure that changes do not break the existing functionality. With GitHub Action, developer can set up workflows to automatically build and test their code every time they push changes to the repository. And this is just one example, right? And that is why your continuous integration is super important. Okay. Now this is fine. And here we have also seen what exactly is a workflow. Workflow basically means whenever we are committing something, right? We really want to make sure that we run some automated build and testing process to ensure that changes do not break the existing functionality. We'll discuss more about the workflows and I'll show you some of the examples with respect to the workflow also. Now, the next thing that we are going to discuss about is continuous deployment. So first of all, we'll go ahead and see the definition. So this is with respect to continuous integration. Continuous deployment extends the concept of CI by automating the deployment of the code to the production environment. Now guys, let's go ahead and discuss about continuous deployment, and I'll definitely want to give you an example. Okay. Let's say that committing process, everything happens in the main branch. Okay. So let's say from this particular GitHub repository main branch. So this is my GitHub repository. Okay. GitHub repository, which is nothing but my main branch. So from here, basically developers from the local commit in the GitHub repository after resolving the conflicts. Okay. But once our code is in the GitHub repository, in most of the companies that we specifically work and multiple use cases that I have worked, usually this strategy is followed, So what they do is that they create a different environments, right? So let's say this is my dev environment. This is my dev environment. This is my QA environment. Okay. Now these all environments can be different servers. It can be different instances. Okay. This can be my UAT environment. Okay. And this can be my production environment. Okay. Production environment. Now see, once all the developers commit all their codes, right? So that basically means this data science project is ready, right? This data science project is ready. But you know that I need to deploy this project somewhere, right? Now, if we really need to deploy it, we cannot directly deploy this into production, right? There should be a set of steps that needs to happen because we need to thoroughly test this entire data science project. Now see, from this GitHub repo, what we do is that after, let's say, deployment, after we probably build the entire data science project or after we build some of the sprints, right? Sprints also, the concept of sprint is that we implement some of the stories, and each and every project is specifically divided into multiple sprints, right? And in each sprint, we define like how many number of modules or how many number of stories we really need to implement. And usually this we follow in an agile process, okay? Let's say in sprint 1, we have implemented 3 stories. Now we need to test all these 3 stories, right? We need to probably give our entire data science project with 3 stories to our QA, right? So that we can do the testing. Now, before we do the testing, what we do is that we probably deploy this in our dev environment. Dev environment basically means this can be our server, right? It can be an AWS EC2 instance. It can be an Azure EC2 instance, Azure instance itself, right? So what we do is that with the help of continuous deployment, we will be taking this entire data science repository, data science content, and we'll be deploying in the dev environment. Here, we will be implementing something like Dockers, right? Dockers, because Dockers actually help you to probably create that images and do the deployment in such a way that you don't have to worry about any issues that may be arising because of different servers, based on the different server configuration. Now, with the help of this particular Dockers, we'll be able to do the deployment. Now, what happens once we do the deployment in the dev? The development team will start testing it. Right? So once the development team is tested, they know that, okay, all the stories are specifically working. Then from the same GitHub repo, we can again create a separate continuous deployment mechanism wherein we deploy the code directly to our QA environment, right? So once we do the deployment in the QA environment, then the QA team will do the testing. And after the QA team finds out all the bugs, after all the bugs is basically released, all the bugs is basically displayed in front of the developers. They solve that particular thing. They commit all the code in the GitHub repo. Again, they try to deploy it in the QA. So once QA team verifies all the bugs, they are good to go. That basically means we are going to go with the next environment that is called as UAT. UAT is just like a pre-prod environment. Okay, we should not directly deploy into the production environment, but there should be a series of testing that should happen. Then again in the UAT environment, the QA team will again do the testing and see all the stories are working fine or not. Okay, and finally, when everything works fine, they take this UAT environment and directly deploy it in the production environment. And this is your live website or live application, which is running in the cloud, right? With some domain name. So this is the entire process. Now you can see over here is that if continuous deployment is not there, how do I take this entire project and store it and probably put it in the development environment? I have to probably take this entire GitHub repo. I have to go ahead and run this particular code over here entirely, deploy it in this particular server, do all the manual activities. But with the help of continuous deployment, if we just design a specific workflows wherein we say that, hey, once a person has actually committed in the GitHub repo, once the entire project has been built, then we go ahead and deploy it directly into the dev environment, right? We give the server details and automatically the deployment should happen, right? Then automatically we go ahead and do the testing. Then once this is done, we will again go ahead and define a workflow. Once no bugs is raised away, we can go ahead with QA, then UAT, then live, right? So this entire workflows can be created with the help of continuous deployment, right? So there are two main important things. One is continuous integration and one is continuous deployment. Okay. Now, I've just given you a basic introduction. As we go ahead, now we are going to also discuss about two important things. One is workflows, right? We will talk more about this particular workflows. I will be taking multiple examples as we go ahead to understand about this specific workflows. And I'll give you with a real world example so that you can also understand it. And after completing this, we will be solving multiple practical examples where I directly show you how you can go ahead and probably work with GitHub Actions. Whenever we say we are working with GitHub Actions, we just need to design a YAML file. Okay. In the YAML file, I will show you how to probably work with GitHub Actions, how you can probably create your workflows and each and everything. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's discuss with the next topic. So guys, now we are going to discuss about the workflows. Okay. Now, whenever we talk about workflows, we also say it as developer workflows. Developer workflows, first of all, we'll go ahead and see the definition. And again, I need to explain you with some of the examples, like how does a workflow actually look like, and what are the key stages also we'll be discussing about it, right? So first of all, let's go ahead and check the definition. A developer workflow refers to the series of steps, practices, and tools that a developer or a team of developers follow to write, test, and collaborate, right? So this is really important. And on and deploy code effectively. The workflow is designed to streamline the software development process, enhance productivity, reduce errors, ensure high quality output, code output. A well-defined developer's workflow incorporate various stages of development from coding to deployment, and often integrate tools for version control, code review, testing, continuous integration, and deployment. So what are the key stages? I hope just by seeing the definition, you got an idea that, a workflow specifically refers to a series of steps and practices that a developer or team of developers can follow to write, test, and collaborate. Okay. So whenever we talk about the key stages of a developer workflow, the first very important stage is something called as coding, right? In order to probably start this, we really need to write a code, right? So the first step is nothing but coding. Now in coding, the first step of developer is basically writing code itself. So here a developer uses an integrated development environment. Let's say one of the example that I can give is VS Code, right? Or any text editor. And then we write a code, let's say in Python programming language. We can probably write in JavaScript, any programming languages that you like. Okay. So based on this particular programming language, we go ahead and write this. Okay. Now during this phase, the developer follows some coding standards. So here you'll be able to see that the developer will also be following some coding standards, some best practices, right? Best practices, like best practices of writing coding for readability, maintainability, and efficiency, right? So this is the first important key stage of a developer's workflow. Now coming to the second one, it is with respect to something called as version control. Okay. Version control. Now, why version control is specifically used, why this is really important in a specific workflow, right? So most of the time we uses this particular, like most of the developer uses this version control system like Git, right? And this will basically manage the entire code base, Okay. This code base, this Git tool specifically, it helps you to collaborate. It allows multiple developer to collaborate, right? This multiple developer to collaborate, right? This is really important. Because of this collaboration only, you will be able to efficiently, quickly complete the projects itself, right? Now, when we say with respect to the collaborating, I'm talking about there will be scenarios. If you have worked in any companies, you may have overwritten some of the other developer codes and all, right? So it is really necessary to use a version control system. I have faced multiple problems where people who do not knew about this, who do not know how to work with version control system, they used to, whatever effort that I have put to develop my entire stories, that would have been overwritten by some of the other developer. So here, main thing that you should really know how to probably commit, right? How to create branches of the repository, how to push the branch, how to pull the branch, and how to resolve a conflict. This is really important. Resolve a conflict, right? resolve a conflict. Specifically, that basically happens in your code, right? So these are some of the important things that we specifically learn in version control. And this is also a part of the developer workflow. Okay. Now coming to the third important key step, right? Third important key step is nothing but code review. Understand, whenever there is a main branch, right? Let's say this is my main branch over here. So this is my main branch. Whenever a developer creates a new story, whenever developer is working on a new story, right, this will basically be the new branch itself, right? And in this particular branch, the developer A starts working on that particular story, and later on this branch is basically merged. Before this branch is merged, right, it is also a very good thing that we go ahead and do some kind of code reviews. Usually we do different kind of code reviews, like peer code review, the architect code review, different code reviews basically happen in a specific team. The main reason is basically to follow the best standard practices for this particular code review, right? Best practices that we there, right? And I hope you have seen this kind of code reviews and all, right? Let's say if there is a code review, if there is a new review of the code that is probably given, right, based on the feedbacks, we need to probably solve that, and by this we will be able to improve the code quality, right? Code quality. So this is also one of the very important stage with respect to the developer workflows. Coming to the next one, which is called as testing. So let's go ahead and discuss about testing. This is also one of the important key stage with respect to the developer workflows. Now you should understand, I'm not talking about QA testing over here, right? I'm talking about automated testing. Automated testing. Now you may be thinking, Krish, how does automated testing basically happen? Specifically in the developer workflow, there are multiple ways. One is unit testing. We definitely write a lot of unit testing, unit test cases and all. The second one is something called as integration testing. The integration testing is basically done so that the previous stories that are developed or previous modules that are developed, that should not break, right? And the third thing, you can also go ahead and design your end-to-end test cases, so that just to find out whether everything is working fine or not. And since this entire automated testing is a part of the workflow, so this should also be getting automatically triggered whenever we try to merge the code into the main branch itself, right? This was one thing. Then the fifth important workflow is specifically with respect to continuous integration, right? CI. Now this continuous integration is really important because I've just given an example with respect to one developer, right? But in a project, you specifically have multiple developers, right? So in every commit of the code, we should be reviewing it. We should be seeing, we should be building, we should be building the entire project. We should be testing the use cases, right? Automated testings and all these things should be there. And the developer should also be notified to fix the issues before merging, right? So it should be notified, the developer should be notified before fixing the issues. For fixing the issues, I'll not say before fixing the issues, for fixing the issues, so that we can go ahead and merge it. And after the continuous integration is done, we already have discussed about CD, that is continuous deployment. After the merge is done successfully, we deploy in different environments. Right? Different servers. Let's say QA server, dev, QA, UAT, right? UAT, prod. So these all servers we specifically use. So this is the entire stages with respect to a developer workflow. And here the two main things is that from development to what kind of issues that we specifically face, what is the different kind of workflow that we probably follow, we can basically go ahead with this, right? And there are some more additional things which is called as monitoring and logging, but I will, right now I'll just conclude till CD, okay? Now let's go ahead and see one of the developer workflow, okay, with a real world example. So here, let's say that one of the example that I will show you, developer workflow, okay, with a real world example. And then in the next, in the upcoming series, again, we will be going ahead and discussion with respect to practical implementation. Let's say that you are one of the developer, you're a developer A, working in a team, okay, for some project, for some data science project, let's say. For some data science project, okay, or for any project. Now let's say you're currently in sprint 3, you have actually got one request of a feature development, right? Feature development. Okay. Now, with respect to this feature development, when you get this particular story, as a developer, you pick a task, you pick this specific task. After you pick this specific task, it can be a bug, it can be a new change request, it can be multiple things, right? Now, once you pick up this task, let's say this is my main branch, right? Main branch. You try to create a new branch for this particular story or for this particular feature, let's say, and you start developing this. Okay. Then this main branch that this additional branch that you have created, this you will start writing the code in your local environment. Okay, local environment by using some IDE. Okay. Then the next step that you specifically go ahead once you do the development, it is nothing but push and pull request. Push and pull request. And this you usually do in your GitHub repository. So pull request is basically written as PR, push request, right? Push request, push and pull request, we basically say, right? Now, once the development is done, what happens? Once the development is specifically done, I will take this entire thing. Okay. I will take this entire thing. I'll paste it over here. Once the development is done, you will be able to see that what developer will do is that from the local, it will try to push into the remote repository once the development is done, right? So let's say if this is my remote repository. So here, this is my remote repository, which I have created as my new branch. Since I'm doing the development in my local environment, once this local environment task is done, we push the code back to our remote repository. Okay. Once we do a remote repository, then we raise a pull request to probably commit in the main repository, right? Initially we created a branches. Now we are raising a pull request to merge the changes in the main branch, right? We need to merge the changes in the main branch. Now, before doing this, other team members will get that request. Okay. And they will be reviewing the pull request for code quality, style, and any other issues. Okay. So they will be specifically doing this particular task. Any other issue, right? So this way, they are actually following some kind of workflow before just committing it to or before merging to the main branch. We are still in the continuous integration phase, right? We have still not gone to the continuous deployment, right? Now, after doing that, the fourth important step that most of the developer follows is nothing but automated CI pipeline. Okay. Now, what this automated CI pipeline does is that, let's say I will give you an example. Once the pull request is opened, okay, a CI pipeline is triggered. A continuous integration pipeline is automatically triggered. I'm just taking an example of a workflow, guys. You really need to understand, right? So here I'm just giving a theoretical example, like what all things basically happen whenever you're developing a story, right? Now, what this pipeline will do, this pipeline builds the application, and runs all test cases. Okay. Now, this test cases can be unit test cases, integration test cases, different test cases. This is one of the CI pipeline, right? Here a CI pipeline is automatically getting triggered. Okay. Now, coming to the third important step over here. If this pipeline passes, then, so here if I'll say if pipeline passes, okay, the PR, the pull request is approved and the code will be merged, right? And merged into the main branch. Merged into main branch. Now what has basically happened? Before merging, we are just doing some kind of nulls and checks. You can probably understand with this automated CI pipeline, right? Then coming to the fifth step, it is nothing but continuous deployment. This is also a part of the developer workflow. Okay. In the continuous deployment, upon merging the PR, a CD pipeline is triggered. Now you need to understand something, right? When I'm saying this PR is nothing but it is a pull request. It can be a push request. This is basically an event. Now based on a specific event, whenever an event occurs, a workflow is basically triggered. And this workflow follows some steps, some process. Let's say over here, we are going to run all the test cases. So this can be one specific workflow. Now in this workflow, pipeline is basically triggered. So here you can see upon merging the PR, once the merge basically happens, a CD pipeline is triggered. And this automatically, the application is automatically deployed, let's say, to any staging environment. Deployed to dev environment, I'll say. Dev or staging environment. Done, right? For further testing. Okay. Once the testing is perfectly done, then later on it can be deployed to the production environment. Now, why I have written all these things? This is just to make you understand how does a workflow go ahead, right? So we started developer workflow. There was a team of data science who's working on this data science project. Developer A got a new feature development. It probably created a new branch and it started working in its local environment that is considering a specific ID. Once the work is done, then what we did, we committed from this local environment to this remote repository or the new branch that we have created. And then we raised a pull request to merge it in the main branch, right? Before merging in the main branch, automatically a workflow got triggered to check, to do the review for the code quality, style and other issues, right? This usually is done manually, okay? So this code quality review is done manually by your peer, right? Then automated CI pipeline. Once the PR is opened, a CI pipeline is automatically triggered. The pipeline builds the application, runs all the use cases, all the test cases, right? Now here, this is really important. So what all test cases, we will see all these examples, we will also see in the practical way, right? We will implement these things, all test cases. Okay, we will see this with an example as we go ahead, right? If the pipeline passes, the PR is approved and merged in the main branch. So here you will be merging this in the main branch. Now, after the merging is done, this continuous deployment pipeline will get triggered. So this in short is we are following a specific workflow. What is triggering an event? Specifically on a specific event, a workflow is basically getting triggered. And based on this triggering, right, something is basically happening, right? It can be building testing use cases. It can be deployment. It can be multiple things. It can be even updating your README file. It may be updating the version number of the README file. Anything it can happen, right? And all these things are basically happening, right? And this is what we basically do, right? We build, we test, automatically all the workflows will get triggered. See, if GitHub action is not there, right, we really need to do all these activities manually, which is really bad, right? Because we really want to focus on the coding part. All this nulls and checks can be actually automated with the help of GitHub Actions. And that is what we basically do, right? Now let's talk about some of the benefits of using all these things, right? So here you'll be able to see I've written some of the benefits, okay? The first benefit, improved collaboration, right? Clear workflow and process facilitate better collaboration among other team members. High code quality, code reviews, automated tests, CICD practices help to maintain a high standard quality. Then reduced errors, automated testing and deployment reduce the likelihood of a human error. Faster delivery, streamlined workflows can enable faster development and release cycle, which is really important. That is the reason we follow this agile process, everything. Continuous feedback loop. Regularly monitoring and feedback helps team quickly identify and address the issues. So these are some of the benefits of using this specific workflow, which you can actually check it out over here. Now, as we go ahead, we will be seeing more practical examples wherein we will try to create a developer workflow directly inside our GitHub repository. And I will show you how you can actually do that. Okay. So let's go ahead and see that. So guys, I'm super excited now to show you the first practical implementation of the GitHub Action workflow. Here we are going to create a Python project, and with the help of GitHub Action, we are going to do the automated testing, with respect to the unit test cases that we specifically write. Now, what all steps are basically required? I will go ahead and show you step by step. Please go ahead and follow these steps. So first of all, go to your github.com. And here I will go ahead and create my new repository. Let's say my new repository name will be GitHub Action. Let's say I'll write test GitHub Action. Okay. And this will be with respect to Python app. So app GitHub Action, I will go ahead and write. And no need to select anything like README file and all. So I will not be selecting any README file or any license. I will just go ahead and create this specific repository. Okay. Once I create this repository, you will be able to see all these things. Okay. Now, let me do one thing. Let me go ahead and open my VS Code, right? So this is my VS Code. I will go ahead and open my terminal. Now, with respect to this terminal, here, I will just go ahead and open my command prompt. I will delete this. Okay. You should have Git installed so that you can basically get started. So what I'm actually going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and create my README file, readme.md file. So let me go ahead and create this over here. So I will write readme.md file. Okay. So this will basically be my readme.md file. I'm just going to create with the same notation over here. And here, let me go ahead and write, this is the Python app. Okay. Okay. Just to write some information in the readme file, right? So once this is done, the next step will be that I will just go ahead and copy this particular command, that is git init, so that we can initialize the repository. I'll go ahead and paste it. So here you can see initialized empty git repository in this particular folder, right? GitHub Actions example.git. So here you'll be, if you go into this particular folder, you'll be able to see .git folder, right? So this is what it is, basically initialized git repository over here, right? So once we do this specific thing, the next step, what I am actually going to do over here is that I will go ahead and add this particular file, that is readme.md file, because I need to commit this specific file, right? So let me quickly go ahead and write git add dot. So that basically means it is going to add all the files that is available. So here you can see it is in the added mode. Index is basically added over here. And then we will go ahead and commit it with our first commit. Okay. So we have committed this particular thing in our remote repository. And then we are going to probably create a branch that is with the name of main. I'll go ahead and execute this. Perfect. Then we are going to add the remote repository origin just by writing git remote add origin, this all values. I will go ahead and quickly execute this. Okay. And finally, I'm going to push all my data inside this particular origin, from origin to the main, right? So once this is pushed, we are all good to go. Now, if I reload this, my readme file will be available over here. Okay. So this is the basic step, and I think we have already covered this in Git tutorials, and I've explained each and every step by step, right? So once this repository is basically created, I will go back to my VS Code and I will start writing my code. Okay. So first of all, I will go ahead and import create my file, which is called as requirement.txt. Now inside this particular file, I will just go ahead and mention some of the libraries that I'm actually going to use. For this instance, I'll just use two libraries. One is pandas and pytest. Okay. Now pytest is specifically required over here because we need to do the unit testing, and with the help of pytest, if you have some basic knowledge with respect to Python, the unit testing can be carried out with this particular library called as pytest. Okay. So I'm going to use this particular library, and I'm going to save this. Okay. Now over here, what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to go ahead and create my simple Python app inside this source folder. And I'm also going to go ahead and create my test cases, right, inside this particular folder, which is called as tests. And I have to use specifically test folder because what PyTest does is that it looks inside the entire code repository where test folder is there. And from that, it will probably pick up all the .py file with respect to the test unit test cases that you have specifically written. Okay. Now inside my source folder, I will go ahead and create my init file so that I will be able to import this wherever I really want. Okay. Whatever packages I'm trying to create inside this. Then I will also go ahead and create my another file, which is called as math_operations.py. Let's say this is the operation file that I'm actually going to create over here. Okay. Now, once I do that, I'm just going to define two simple operations. One is addition and subtraction. So I'll create two functions: definition addition a comma b, return a plus b, and definition subtraction a comma b, which is nothing but returning a comma b. So this maths_operation.py file has these two functionalities with respect to this two definition. Now, similarly, if I really want to go ahead and write my use cases, so here inside my test use cases, first of all, I will go ahead and create one more file, which is called as __init__.py. Okay. And along with this, I will create one more file, which is nothing but test_operations.py. Okay. Now inside this test_operation_py, I am going to import both this add and subtraction function. In order to import it, how do we import it in a modular coding? I'll go ahead and write from src maths operation. I'm going to import add comma subtract, right? So I'm going to basically import this two function, that is add comma subtract. Okay. So add and subtract is basically imported. I hope that is the same function name. Okay. Now we will go ahead and create another function, which is called as test_add. And this will basically be my test cases, which I'm actually going to run over here. So if I go ahead and write assert, okay, assert of add 2,3. So my 2,3 output should be 5, right? So this assert statement is basically going to check whatever output that I'm actually going to get from this particular function, is it equal to this, right? If it is equal, it is going to give me true. Okay. Similarly, I will go ahead and write assert with respect to add. And if I just go ahead and write -1, 1, right? It is again going to give me 0. I can also go ahead and write with my other function, that is subtraction, where I'm going to write 5, 3, which is going to basically give me 2. So it is just going to check these three different use cases. Since I've created another function for test_add, let me just remove this. Okay. And let me create another function for subtract. So I will say test_subtract. And this is my unit use cases that I really want to execute it, right? So here I'm just going to go ahead and paste this. Similarly, I will go ahead and paste some more assert statements so that it is going to check all these unit cases. Okay. So here, if I go ahead and write 4, 3, this is going to give me 1. If this is 3, 3, it is going to give me 0. So this functionality should be working fine, right? If I give 5 or 2, 3, it should be giving me -1. Okay. So it is basically, I really want my PyTest library to check this specific use cases and see if it is working fine with respect to the functions that I have actually created. Okay. So this looks perfect. Two folders. One is source, where my operation is there. One test folder, which this PyTest will be specifically looking at it. Okay. Now, once this is done, what I will do, I know this will definitely work. I will not execute even in my local. I will quickly go ahead and commit this. Okay. So let's go ahead and commit this. So I will write git add dot. Okay. Then I will say git commit -m unit test cases updated. Okay. And I'll press enter. And then I will write git push from origin to main. Okay. So once I push this, here you can see the push is done, and I think I should be able to see it over here. Okay. So here is my source and test. Now it's time that I will try to automate testing this entire use cases, unit test cases by the help of GitHub Action. Now here is one of the you can see this, right? This symbol over here, actions. Here is where we basically go ahead and define our GitHub action itself. Okay. And they are pre-built GitHub actions that are already available. Create and test a Python application, create and test a Python package or multiple Python version, and all are there, right? So let's configure one of them. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's go to the code. Okay, and here in order to probably start this, I will go back to my code. Here I will go ahead and create my folder. And remember, whenever we go ahead and create it, you really need to understand this. See, if I'm going and creating any action, let's say I want to create this Python application, create and test a Python application. I'll go ahead and click on configure. Once I click on configure, here you will be able to see that I will be getting some things. Okay. And one very important thing is that it automatically creates this folder .github/workflows/python app.yaml file. So this, whatever GitHub actions or configuration we set up, we basically set up in a YAML file. And we really need to understand this, what exactly is this YAML file. Okay. I will try to make you understand this. Okay. And what exactly is this YAML file? How do we work with this YAML file? But first of all, we will go ahead and create this GitHub workflows. Okay. GitHub/workflows python app.yaml. Okay. So let's quickly go to my folder over here and let me go ahead and write .github. Okay. And inside this, I will create another folder that is nothing but workflows. Okay. And then I can also go ahead and create one file over here. Let's say this will be my continuous integration YAML file, or I can just go ahead and write Python, or I can just say unit test.yml file, right? So this basically becomes my YAML file. Okay. And this is where I will go ahead and write my YAML file. Do you want to install the recommended GitHub Action extension for GitHub for unit test? I'll say install it because I will definitely be requiring it because it also provides this amazing thing. Sign in to GitHub. So I will go ahead and sign in. You can also install this particular extension. It is up to you. Okay. Open. Perfect. So it has got installed. Okay. Now let me go ahead and write this. So quickly, I will go ahead and open this. Okay. Workflows. I will go ahead and define my entire workflow over here. Okay. So whatever code I specifically write, I will be writing it over here. Now, before we go ahead and start working on this particular workflow, it is important that we understand what are the important things in a specific workflow. Okay. It is really, really important. And that is what I'm actually going to explain you over here step by step. I will first of all copy a specific workflow. Okay. So this is my workflow and we will define this step by step. Okay. What are the different points over here that we are going to define? So let me just open a pen over here and we will try to understand this, how this entire workflow is written. Okay. And just by seeing the comments, this is just a basic one because they have a lot of functionality specifically with respect to the workflow. The workflow, whenever we go ahead and write our YAML file, right? We just need to write in the form of key value pairs, right? And GitHub Action supports some important things that you really write in the form of key value pairs, right? So first of all, we start with the name, right? So this is my name. Name basically indicates what is my workflow name, right? So here I have written Python CI, Python continuous integration. Then in order to trigger a workflow, as I said, we need to define some of the events, right? Events. Now events are what? Events are like in a GitHub repository when I'm doing push, when I'm doing pull, I can probably do merge, right? When I can probably do delete, different events will be specifically there. And based on this events, we can trigger a workflow. We can trigger a workflow, right? And that is what we are basically doing over here. So to trigger the workflow, we have to write all our events on this particular keyword, right? So here we define an on keyword and inside this is specifically my event, right? So this is nothing but event. So this is nothing but it is saying that, hey, whenever we are doing a push, right, in branches like main, or whenever we are doing a pull request in branches like main, right? So this and this are my events, right? Similarly, I can define any number of events in this particular format. I can also specify multiple branches if I want. Okay. So here I have written main branch, right? In projects, you may also have some other branches like staging, production, right? Different branches you may have. Two important things that we have already seen. One is with respect to the name of the GitHub action that we really want to go ahead with. then this is how we can basically trigger the workflow based on specific events. Here we have taken two events. One is push and pull. So inside the on keyword, right, we are basically writing push and pull request, and on which branches we are going to probably trigger this events. Okay. Then we go ahead with jobs, right? We may have multiple jobs where we will be running. Okay. And remember, one thing is that this jobs will be, we can name this jobs with respect to test or any kind of names that we want. And this specific job, this entire event or running, basically we need to probably run our entire use cases or test cases, right? We will be running on this Ubuntu latest container, right? So what GitHub provides is that they provide containers, right? Containers where they can probably run this entire application and they can test it. Now it is not like you only get Ubuntu latest container, you also get Windows, you also get Mac OS containers, right? So this all containers is also available, and based on the type of containers that you really want to use, you can probably specify in this particular keyword that is runs on. Okay. So once these are the very important things that we basically go ahead and write. So this is my job where we are starting, and then for every workflow steps we basically define in this particular block, where we specify steps. So in the first step here, you can see check out the code from repository. When we write check out the code from repository, that basically means we use this particular action. This is the pre-built action that is defined by GitHub action, where we are going to check out the code from the repository. It will check out all the code from the repository. And here, with respect to different action, this checkout version may change, okay, with some more added functionalities. In this case, we are just using action/checkout@v2, that is version 2. This in short is nothing but it is basically triggering an event wherein we take the code from the repository and we check it out, okay, so that it can be moved towards the container and it can be tested over there. Right? Perfect. So till here, I hope everybody is very much clear. Three main important things. One is the name. Then we have specifically defined the events and jobs. Jobs will be running in some kind of container, right? So here we are using a Ubuntu latest container, which is the Linux container. We can also use Linux, Windows or Mac OS container. Then we go ahead and write our steps, like steps with respect to the execution of the workflow. Now, after the step 1 is done, we go to the step 2. In the step 2, we are basically going to create a Python environment, and we can define any number of steps like this in this format. We have to write a name. We have to basically write with respect to users. And here in this setup Python environment, what we are doing is that we are again going to use this actions, which is nothing but setup Python @v2, that is version 2. This is again provided by GitHub action. And this is specifically used in order to create a Python environment, right? So here we need to define our with keyword along with the Python version that we really want to go ahead with. Let's say I want to go ahead with 3.8. I will be using 3.8 over here. So I've written 3.8 over here itself. You can also go ahead and write 3.9, 3.10. You can also change this version from V2 to V3. And again, you can go ahead and check out the documentation, like what exactly is the differences between different versions. It is just used to add some more functionalities while we are creating some Python environment. Okay. Then the third step is that we need to install all the dependencies, because again, if I really want to run all the test use cases, I definitely require the PyTest library, right? And this PyTest library needs to be installed in the container. So here we go ahead with the third important step, that is nothing but install dependencies, and we're going to run two commands. One is the pip install upgrade. I have to probably run this, and then we go ahead and install the pip install -r requirement.txt. Here what all libraries is required, that all will get installed. Okay, that all will get installed. And finally we go ahead and run our test. That is nothing but we just use this run test. The name will be run test, and we are going to just run this particular command that is called as PyTest. As soon as this particular command is run in the container, it will start looking for that test folder, wherever that specific test folder is there, and then it will probably go ahead and execute all the unit test cases. So this is just one example of the continuous integration. Now what I am going to do is that I will just go ahead and copy this entire thing. Okay. And I'm going to paste it over here. See, I'm going to paste it over here. Okay, paste it over here. As soon as I paste it, the name can be anything. As I said earlier, Python app.yaml, right? Now, as soon as I commit this, or as soon as I commit this particular changes in my GitHub, my entire workflow should get triggered as soon as I see, when I'm committing the changes, that basically means a pull request or a push request is basically happening, right? So as soon as I commit these changes, see, create in Python Python app.yaml file, commit directly to the main branch. That basically means a push request is basically going. Once I commit this particular changes, now here you can see the magic. See this magic where this is getting triggered, right? This is basically getting triggered. If I go to the actions, here you can see my some symbol like this brown symbol is basically coming up, and if I go ahead and execute this, see, this test has got triggered, right? Now it is doing set up a job, check out the code, install dependencies. See, it is installing all the dependencies and it is running all the test. The test is specifically run. You can see it has gone to this test folder. It is picking up everything and it is passed 2 test cases, right? And post job cleanup, post checkout code, all these things are specifically happened. Let's explore each and every step, what has basically happened, and we'll try to relate this to our repository, right? So first of all, set up job is basically there, right? Currently run a version. This is by default. Here you can probably see with respect to the GitHub, it is coming. Complete job name test. Okay, so from where this particular job name is coming up, if you go over here and see, I've given my job name as test. Whatever name you can change, write it over here, you can change it over here, and based on that, you'll be able to see. And this is running on Ubuntu latest. Okay, now let's go ahead with respect to the next step. Okay, so this is my setup job. Now checkout code. Now this checkout code, how it is happening? Run actions / checkout at v2. So it is syncing the repository from my GitHub repository. It is getting the git version, right? It is temporarily overriding all these things, adding the repository directory to the temporary git global, right? And it is probably initializing the repository, disabling. It is doing some of the other steps, right? So this is what exactly happens in the checkout code. Now set up Python basically means what? Here we are going to set up this Python at v2, right? So this is the version that we are specifically using. Now automatically just by this, which is provided by GitHub Action, it is being set up, right? Then you have this install dependencies. Here we are upgrading the pip, and we are also satisfying all our, we are installing all our requirement.txt. So here you can see pandas and pytest is getting installed, right? So pandas and pytest will be getting installed in the same container, right? The Ubuntu latest container. So once the install dependency is done, then we are going to run pytest. Run pytest, from where it is basically coming, it is coming from this particular command. Here you can actually see I've written run pytest, right? In order to run this, whenever we run and whatever commands we are specifically writing, it is just going to run that, right? So run pytest, and it is able to see that from which folder, like test folder, it has all the py file. It is going to run that, and it is basically going to execute it, right? Then there are something like post setup Python, post checkout guide, and complete the job, right? So this is just an example of how a workflow is basically getting triggered. Now whatever commits I make, let's say I make a commit in the readme file or any code file, right? It is just going to automatically trigger that particular action. So if I go to my action, it is automatically triggering it, right? And again, it is going to probably check all the unit test cases, right? So this way, this is really important, because see, in a project, right, there are many developers who will be specifically working. Now let's say a developer, after probably creating a new story, has committed the code. It needs to probably run all the unit test cases so that we just understand that nothing is basically getting broken, right? So yes, this was about a basic example of an end-to-end project with respect to workflow with the help of GitHub Actions. As we go ahead, we will be seeing more amazing examples with more different techniques and tools like Dockers and all. I'll try to show you with respect to that. So yes, this was it. I will see you all in the next video. Thank you.